Thank you so much, Paige. I really appreciate it. I appreciate being here at Longwood University LinkedIn Influencer Week. I'm going to actually make sure you can see me. I'm going to stop my video and put it on my screen. So hold on a second. Okay, I hope you can see that. So today is about how to self-promote without being a jerk, which basically means not being this guy. And by that I mean that you can focus not on just selling and not just your objective and not just, you know, what do you want to get out of being on social media, being out there in your company or organization or in your network and trying to be, you know, what do I want? I want to hit my quota. I want to be a quota crusher. I want to get promoted. You know, that's very self-absorbed. It may be your goal. I'm not telling you don't, you know, try to be successful. What I'm saying is that the path to being successful is not to be obsessed with your goal. It's instead to be obsessed with other people. So regardless of what you want, whether you want to attract new clients or increase the value of your content, help your colleagues, get quota, get promoted, there's one strategy to do that. Before I get going and talk about this, I want to ask you all a question so I can get a sense. You know, webinars are hard because I really prefer to talk to one person at a time, and I can't see each of you individually. But I will leave plenty of time for questions, and I will give you my email address at the end. So if I don't answer your question, you are more than welcome to email me directly, and I will respond to you. So please do that. But I want to, Paige, can you put up the question, please? Okay, so to help me calibrate this and help me address your interest today, I want to ask which of these most interest you. And the choices are how to do better in your current job, how to get a different job, how to grow your business, how to increase your social media impact, or all or most of the above. If you can vote, that would be great. Okay, let's see what happens. So everything. Okay, I will address everything. This is like the political season. There's no clear winner, but everybody wants everything. So that's easy. And what I'm going to share today basically works on all of those. So thank you very much for doing that. And let me go forward. Okay, so basically, you know, well, I suspect usually when I talk about this topic, most of the people who come and participate are people who fundamentally aren't that comfortable self-promoting. But, you know, this works either way. There are people who are in that category, and there's people who are a little bit too obsessed with, you know, you're taking pictures of yourself, you're trying to be, you know, it's you. And the fact is that pretty much everything that I do, I'm trying to use the word you, so not I, but I'm trying to talk about other people and trying to be more focused on them than I am on myself. So let me just tell you how this worked for me and why I did this. So when I started on LinkedIn, there were basically 100 of us who could be on LinkedIn, who could publish on LinkedIn. And they were all people who had staffs. They were all people who were famous. Nobody had any idea who I was. And the thing that got me onto LinkedIn was something that no one really cared about, which I discovered very rapidly. The first few pieces I did on LinkedIn, I deleted because 72 people. So I evolved to this strategy, which was just my personal nature, which was the only way to compete against people like that and to compete against fierce competitors on social media is to help other people. And it was natural to me. And so I recognized that it was also a fundamentally wonderful and highly effective social media strategy. So that is what I've done. And I'm going to take you through really how I've broken this down over time. So I guess about maybe 4.5 years ago, I had this thought that, you know, I was going through life and I wasn't really, how to say it, I didn't have a something that I could remember every single day and wake up and do. And it would help me to get my personal goals and my career goals all together. And so what I did, and it really just almost came to me in a flash, was I came up with this sentence, which I have used ever since to power my personal and professional life. Be generous and expert, trustworthy and clear, open-minded and adaptable, persistent and present. And I have since used this. First I did a PDF, a little 15-page thing. I gave away 40,000 copies of this. I got a lot of great response. People said it helped them. I turned it into a book of the same title as this presentation. Same thing. So I'm going to use this for the bulk of the conversation, these 8 words, and show you exactly what I mean by it and how you can use it on social media to, and not just social media, in an organization, with your network, anything, to power the way that you think about it. Because if you can remember how to do something, then you can turn it into something. So I'm just going to go through these 8 words. Generous. By generous, I mean, can you focus on other people in a sincere and giving way? Not, I'm going to pretend to be nice, but can you actually be generous? So here's how I break this down. A lot of people who are unsuccessful in self-promotion, whether because they're too aggressive or because they're too just, help anyone, they don't really haven't thought out how this works. The way I think of this is, if you start with kindness, you're much more likely to be empathetic. If you're empathetic, you then can support really powerful and strong relationships. And in business, strong relationships ultimately lead to profit. And by profit, it might mean you can find a job that you like and that you love and you're good at, or it could mean you can grow a business, or it could mean you can be a successful entrepreneur. But if you do this naturally, it works extremely well. So a personal example, I think Laura Novak basically runs a photography studio in Delaware and Pennsylvania that she's since started to franchise. But I just found her, she was an interesting entrepreneur, and to help her, I wrote an article about her on LinkedIn. It did very well, and I was just interested in, and she talked about the ways that the female entrepreneurs operate and how that was different than male, and how she had struggled to go to male-dominated networking events. And anyway, the point of it is that it interested me. I wanted to help her, so I suggested that we do a slide share together. And it turned out to be this one, Beyond Solo. It generated over 1 million views, which frankly for me is extraordinarily good. For her, it was extraordinarily good. But the point of this is that my motivation was absolutely, I didn't think this will do better than other things that I do. I thought, I want to help Laura. I think she's interesting, and I think what she has to say will help other people. And in doing so, I not only helped Laura, I not only helped other people, but I helped myself. And I found that time and time again, by being generous, I end up benefiting.
Hey Bruce, it's Paige. I'm going to jump in really fast. If you want to maybe try speaking up a little bit, or moving your microphone, it's just a little muffled, and so people are having a hard time hearing.
Sure. Is this better?
Much better. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you. I apologize to everyone, and hope this works better. So the second point is expert. In order to be successful, you have to find something that you do extremely well that other people are willing to pay you to do. No one ever says, quick, find me a generalist. That's just simply not the way to succeed. You have to be able to. So if you're 21 years old and you're in a really entry-level job and it bores you, you still have to find something in that job that you do extremely well. And obviously, as you move ahead in your career, you find more higher-level things, and we'll talk about that. For example, this is my diagram, but I did not come up with the basic concept underneath it of these 4 intersecting circles of what you love, what you do well, what others will pay for, and what the world needs. But the piece that I've added to this is, that intersection between all four is where, it's labeled bliss. It's where you have, it's really the sweet spot, meaning that you have, you're operating on all cylinders. The thing, people talk about grit, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but the more you grow, that is, you see this little arrow going to the right, growth, you actually have the ability to expand that sweet spot by getting better at things, by learning, by picking up new skills. And as you do that, you actually expand the potential intersection of all four of these things. You're helping other people. You're making more money if that's one of your goals, but you're really leveraging what you love to do. And that's the best way to be. Trustworthy on social media, in a career, it is absolutely essential. And I've posted a few things about this recently, and people have pushed back. But here's my perspective: you're either trustworthy or you're not. There is no middle ground. And the best way I have to tell you about this, I used to be partners with these two people, Don Peppers and Martha Rogers. They were are in the customer experience space. They've written a number of books. The last one was specifically about trust in a digital age. And they came up with this sentence, which I think is genius, mostly because it's not done in business. And they mean do the right thing proactively. Many people, many companies do the right thing when people are looking. So an example from business is Don wrote an article about stamps.com, and where you can automate your get postage and do it via the web, and they have a monthly membership. And so he wrote about someone who basically signed up for the service, never used this, realized 18 months in that they were getting charged, I don't know what it is, let's say $30 a month, and never used the service. Now, the right way for a company like that to operate would be, if you see that somebody's been charged 18 months in a row and never used the service, well, you should call them and you should say, are you having a problem setting this up? Can we help you? That's not what Stamps.com was doing. What they were doing is they were making it hard for people to cancel. So you could sign up online easily, but if you wanted to cancel, it was almost impossible. You had to send a note. You couldn't just do it online. And you see that time and time again. The companies are saying, for example, well, we get charged, we make a monthly fee. We don't want to tell people, to cancel. We don't want to let them. And the same thing individually. That is, if you're trying to help somebody, that means you're trying to help them, whether they're watching or not. That you're not going to say something bad about them. That you're not going to be one day positive and one day negative. This is a tough thing to do, but the way that I look at trust is, for example, I hate to say anything negative in general in life, but especially online. There's enough negativity. I don't want to be one of those people. And being proactive in this regard takes conscious thought. I've seen people who in seminars have said, well, I want to be positive, and 10 minutes later they're being negative. So that's one of the reasons I wrote this whole credo. That's one of the reasons I think that you have to think incredibly consistently about things like trust and this one, clarity, clear. So we're basically be generous and expert, be trustworthy and clear. Clear means knowing what you want and then being able to communicate it effectively. So on social media, if you're pitching something in your company, if you're talking to a client, clarity is about balancing these three things. Who's your audience? What's the medium? So are you using social media? Are you face-to-face? Are you using PowerPoint? Are you doing a video? And what's your message? And if you get all of those right, then you achieve clarity. What happens is a lot of times the people do not change their message based on who the audience or who the medium is. So, for example, you'll publish a press release on LinkedIn. Won't work at all. You can't take a white paper and publish it on LinkedIn. It won't work. You can't take an article and put it into a presentation that you do face-to-face. You can't go into the accounting department and do the same presentation you would give to your creative department. Being able to think this out and change it is critically important, and most people don't do that. And one of the things that happens online is that people forget there's no context for what you're saying. So, for example, if you're on LinkedIn and you have a LinkedIn headline or you have a summary in your profile, and it says marketing manager, or I'm a marketing expert. Well, that doesn't mean anything to most people because it's too general. Well, do you do healthcare marketing? Are you the CMO of a company? Or are you a marketing intern? So you have to recognize that if you're trying to broaden your network, for example, or you're trying to proactively expand your network, you have to give people the context of, so for example, you might say, well, on my LinkedIn profile, that's going to people who know nothing about me. So the audience is like mass marketing. You have to tell them everything. On the other hand, if you get, for example, a job interview, well, then you need to know everything about that company. You need to know as much as possible about who you're going to be talking about. You need to have your questions ready. And it's the opposite of mass marketing. Oh, one of my favorite words is coherent, and I hesitate to use it because I think people don't often get it, but I'm going to use it here. I think about coherence in terms of really the whole picture of how you operate in the world. That is, do you know what you want? An easy example of coherence is if you say you want to lose weight, well, then you should exercise more and eat less. And if you say, I'm obsessed with losing weight, and you don't do that, that's incoherent. I don't mean to be harsh, but it's not in line with your strategy. And so coherence is about knowing what you want, doing what you say you're going to do, living by your value, not just when it's easy, not just in the weeks when you're not that busy, but all the time, all the day in and day out. And incoherence is the opposite. It's, your values are twisting and turning, and you do it in easy time. I know I used to be a consultant in business, and what I saw in business was that companies, so for example, I used to work in the customer relationship, customer experience space. And I know from that companies would say, well, we treat our customers extremely well. And when you really ask the question, it was 2% of the time they would treat. Most of the time, they treated people pretty badly, pretty anonymously. If you're trying to advance your own career, you're trying to be successful, you're trying to attract customers, you're trying to personally succeed, coherence is extremely important, which means one of the reasons that I came up with this 8-word phrase was so that I could be coherent and so that I could express my values to other people. And when people said, well, what works for you? I can tell them these 8 words. And then, for example, if you're writing, if you're posting online, if you're doing things internally, if you're responding to emails, if you're having personal conversations with people, coherence means saying, well, I know in my head, I can tell you exactly what I want. And I can tell you how what I'm doing today relates to that. That's clarity. The open-minded is the next one. And this basically means no matter how expert you become, never stop listening and learning. This is important. Remember those 4 interlapping circles that I showed and showed bliss in the middle. The more open-minded you are, the more you'll learn, the more you'll grow, and you'll be successful. I like this. This is kind of my crude example of a die. that basically only has two outcomes. Either you win, that is, you do what you set out to do, or you learn. This is simply a mindset that says, I'm going to screw up. I'm going to try to, I'm going to pitch somebody. I'm going to fall on my face. I'm going to give a presentation. It's not going to work. I'm going to write a book or an article. No one's going to read it. But from each of those things, I can learn and I can do it again. And I will get better at it. So there is no outcome of failure. There's only an outcome of, it didn't go as well as I wanted, but I'm going to learn. But this is dependent on saying, I don't know everything. And when I have the opportunity to, when I stumble, I'm going to figure out why. When things disappoint me, or when there's a miserable week, I'm going to go back and I'm going to try and understand that. And I'm going to listen to people who have opinions that are different than mine. My next point is adaptable, meaning keep your options open so that things are always going to happen that you don't expect, and yet you'll be able to cope with that. A lot of people do the opposite of this. A lot of companies do the opposite of this, meaning that you do things the way that, so somebody says, I'm a highly detail-oriented person. I have a certain process. I do things this way. When I post something online, it's always in this very rigid, they don't say rigid, but they say specific format. The issue to that is that you're basically going to be in this very narrow space. You're not going to learn. You're not going to meet new people. You're not going to have different outcomes. And, I've been trying to figure out a way to do a post on Forbes where I write that basically talks about these people who are immune to feedback, meaning that, you're just always doing it the way that it makes sense for you, that's natural to you. I want you to be genuine. I want you to be authentic, but I also want you to experiment and to try new things and to be open to different feedback. So for example, in a company level, there are companies who are very good at execution, meaning, we can make low-cost products again and again and again, and we're very good at making high-quality products, but we're kind of a boring company. Then there are other startups who are highly innovative, creative, but they can't execute. No matter what your industry, no matter what your field, you will be more successful if you can do both, which basically means when you want to be innovative, you have to try new things. You have to experiment. You have to brainstorm. But then you need to switch to execution, which means you have to be detail-oriented. You have to be anal. You have to be focused on doing things exactly the same again and again and again. And it is the ability to do both that leads to success, not the ability to do one. So if you're a highly creative, idea-driven person, well, you will be successful if at times you can also be highly disciplined and execution-oriented and work with that type of people. And the reverse is also true. If you're highly detail-oriented, can you stop that for a day? Can you go and interact with creative people? Can you think of a completely different way to do things that will lead to success? The seventh of these, 7 out of 8, is persistence. It means keep going until you get what you want. So everybody talks about grit. I actually searched out this by Eric Barker. How do you develop grit? Grit is just long-term focus on a specific goal. And this is what he said. I think it helps. I talked earlier about doing what you love. It means practicing again and again and again. It means changing your mindset from I'm looking from a job to having a calling, putting some purpose in. It means being positive and hopeful. But most importantly, and this is the one that I really focus on, is if you want to have grit and you're hanging out with a group of people who are fickle or who don't like to work that hard or who are negative, it's going to be extraordinarily difficult to cultivate grace. That your environment nearly always wins. So if you want to be persistent, if you want to be tenacious, and I do think that leads to success, then you have to find other people who feel that same way and cultivate that sort of mindset of daily interactions. And I personally try to do this all the time. I try to look for people like this, and I try and support people like this. And then finally, being present to me is really on social media, for example. I'm not saying meditate online, but it is fundamentally being able to listen and learn. So I'd like to think of being quiet long enough. For example, I publish a lot of things. I read every single comment that I see on anything I've done. And I read it trying to hear what you said, what someone else said, what it is that, what happened to this idea or observation that I had, and my ability to actually shut up and learn powers most of what has been successful for me. That is, my best ideas, but the ideas that I've found that are most valuable in my own career, my own life, have come from, okay, I have my say, and now I'm quiet, and now I'm paying attention, and that's where I get great ideas. So I appreciate your listening to all that. The way I say this is, be generous and expert, trustworthy and clear, open-minded and adaptable, persistent and present. And this is the picture I use to think about this. But this fundamentally is a framework for helping other people. But if you do this, unbelievably good things happen to you. This is the best. Salespeople use something, they might not use my exact words. The best leaders, the best man. Think about the difference between a manager who's sincerely trying to help her team as opposed to trying to take credit for what her team does. Think about a leader who doesn't always need to be on the stage, who doesn't always need to be thinking about, I'm going to make $32 million this year, but is genuinely thinking about, how do we serve others? How do we come together as a team? How do we cooperate? How do we look at opportunities in the world to succeed? Paige, if you can put up the other question I had, I want to ask this of you, and then I'm going to give you a quick way to remember what I've done, and then we'll take questions. So I'm curious, in general, I realize I'm using different words, but how do you feel? How close is what I've been talking about to the way you all already operate? I'm going to pause for a second and let you vote. Give another second, we'll see what happens. So the majority opinion is I do this some other time. And that doesn't surprise me. Here's what I think. The reason that I came up with my credo that I've just taken you through, and I'm going to take you through a even simpler way before I open it up to questions to remember this, is because I came up with that because we're human, which basically means that in the day-to-day grind, in the day-to-day rush, in the being torn between family and work and obligations and what you want to do and trying to stay in shape, it's extraordinarily difficult to do this all the time. And yet what I find is the more, over the last 4 or 5 years, I've given more and more of my effort and more of my time to not only doing this, but to how do I remember this? How do I keep this front of mind? And it makes an extraordinary difference in my outcomes. And I've had clients and friends and colleagues who I've seen do the same thing, or who just naturally operate this way. And they're among the most successful people I know, and also among the most, happy people I know. So let me give you, I just gave you 8 things in one sentence, it's still not as simple as it could be. So before I open this up to questions, I want to give you an even simpler way. This is one of the things that in publishing on social media, people said, consistently, can you come up with a simpler way? Can you shorten? Could you make this 4? Could you do something, an acronym or something that I could remember? And I came up with, remember, G2C2. G2C2 means grit, growth, clarity, and compassion. So grit, focus relentlessly on what matters to you. Growth is always strive to expand your abilities and results. Clarity, I talked about at length. I won't say that again. And then the foundation of this, the whole thing, is compassion, is proactively helping others. I'm not going to get too wonky about this. You can see that I took all of those 8 things: expert and persistence, adaptable and open-minded. I fit them into grit and growth and clarity and compassion. If you want to remember my list of 8, that's fine. But if you say that's too much and I'm never going to be able to do that day in and day out, just remember G2C2. So, and here's what another quick image of this: never quit, never stop learning, never deliberately be confusing. So I try and edit everything I do 3-4 times, and never just be selfish. I don't believe in absolute altruism as a goal in life, meaning that, if you're going to be successful, if you're going to raise a family, if you're going to build a business, if you're going to have a great career, you have to be self-oriented. You have to have certain goals that you want. And that's okay, but you can't lead with that. You can't start with that. You have to be compassionate, empathetic, understanding other people. And the more that I let that drive what I do, the more successful I become. And frankly, the easier it gets. So if you think about grit, this slide was originally, this red down the bottom is supposed to be kind of, I originally used this as a, how many, just kind of social media reach, how many views you're going to get, how much interaction. And you see there's peaks here. And what's going to happen is you're going to go out and try some of these things, I hope, and it's going to make a tiny bit of a difference. But if you stick with it, it's going to keep making a tiny bit of a difference. And every now and then you're going to have a real significant success and that continued upward trend. I look at what I've done on LinkedIn or Forbes or elsewhere, and it's not that, bang, all of a sudden I do something and it's successful. To the extent that I've had success, it's because I just keep going. I just keep trying, and when something doesn't work, I change it. I try and do something different. So if you only remember 10% of what I said, my friend Carmen Simon says that's what happens. Remember grit, growth, clarity, and compassion. Let that drive what you do, and you will be successful. As I said before, this is my website, but my email address, please, I'd love to answer your questions now, but if I can't get to something, bkasanoff@gmail.com, email me, I will respond to you. I think Paige is going to help me with taking questions. And thank you for listening to this point. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So thanks so much, Bruce. If you want to hop on back with us, we'd love to see your face. The discussion has been awesome in the chat bar, guys. Thank you so much for all your great questions. If you think of anything more while we keep this presentation going, feel free to put them in the chat bar, and I'll be sure to ask Bruce. So one of the most popular questions that we've had is from Amy. She wants to know, how can she manage up, meaning that making upper management aware of all the things that she's doing. She's concerned that her accomplishments seem to only stop at her manager and that she's taking credit for them.
Well, so here's the deal. I think that 2 things of what I said are really fundamental to that. One of which is you have to be realistic, and you have to think about, how do I help this person or people above me? And it's not just thinking about it in terms of elsewhere. it's, so if you have when I used to work in larger organizations, I used to think, who controls my fate? And what do they need? And how do I help them get it? So it may be that they want to get promoted to the next level, and so they're looking for credit. And so how do I help them look good? So a lot of people get caught in that trap of saying, I personally am not getting credit. I personally, my manager is stopping other people from knowing I'm successful. And sometimes the right strategy is help your manager get promoted, and that will help you. And if you become essential to their career, you will do better. The other part is, when I was talking about clarity, is trying to make sure that what you, for example, one of the reasons that I create, you see I had in my presentation these different images. I do that not because I think I'm the best artist in the world, but I think that I can get a message across clearly, and by creating it, it kind of, you'd be surprised how much business I get because I have this little tiny Bruce Kasanoff at the bottom of an illustration, and people share it, and it comes back and helps me. So the same thing in terms of you're doing, instead of just doing a 20-page presentation that somebody's going to take 2 slides out of, do one image that somebody can use, or do a very short write-up that somebody can use, and know always what it is that you want to get across.
Sure. That's great advice too. So this one's from Hisham. He wants to know if this same kind of mantra, if it can be applied to brands, not just your own personal brand.
I think it can be applied to brands. I think it's very difficult for many companies to do that because the impulse to be, what's my quota? What's my quota? That sort of mindset is difficult. There are, USAA over the years, which is based in serving the armed forces in terms of financial services, has been very good at that in terms of, this is our audience, these are the people we serve, we're trying to do this, what's right for them. So it requires a commitment from the top of the organization and from the bottom up. But sure, you can do that. This is actually very close to a purpose-driven organization, what I'm describing.
Cool. Okay. This one comes from Anthony. He says that his biggest issue is figuring out how to build this social following. How do you even start publishing articles, or do you find a topic that's more important to your industry or that you're knowledgeable about?
So 2 things. One is that, I showed that slide earlier on that, my competitors had styles I didn't. I had 0 followers. LinkedIn was nothing for me. Meaning I never got any inquiries from LinkedIn, never got any business. I've been on LinkedIn for years. I'm not trying to be negative about LinkedIn because now it works great. But it was all about, for example, I was in the customer experience space, and I realized that LinkedIn presented for me an opportunity to do more what I was interested in than what I had done for years. And so I used LinkedIn as a way to get my voice in many regards, to say, for the first time in a long time, I have the opportunity to say what I really care about instead of, somebody hired me 18 months ago to do. And so, everybody is different in terms of what you're comfortable with. Some people, for example, will not write original pieces because that's just not their strength. But you have interest, you can curate other people's content, and then there are people who are saying, no, I'm really fascinated with a certain subject, and I'm going to do that. I believe that social media is the best place to find your voice, to test ideas, to find that intersection between what interests me and what interests other people. And so I would suggest, test constantly, meaning try something, see how many people like it, see who reacts, listen very closely what people say, and most importantly, focus on engagement. Don't worry about, do 12 people see it or do 200 people see it. Worry about, of the people who saw it, how did they respond? If 100 people read an article that you wrote and one likes it, that's really bad. You did not do a good job there. If 100 people read something you did and 15 people like or share or comment. So I look at 10%, meaning if you add up like, share, and comment, and then divide it by the number of views, that gives you a percentage. In my mind, that should be 10% or more. 15% is much better, but if you're in the 10 to 15% range or even higher, that's high engagement. That's great. If you get 100 people to read something and 15% of them do something in response, then that was a huge success. If you focus on that, over time, you'll grow your following. Don't focus on views, because if you get 1,000 people to see something and nobody likes it, that's meaningless.
Interesting. Okay, so this one actually is from our presenter yesterday, Jeff Hayden. He wants to know, so he's got his profile all set. People are now starting to listen to you. So as your profile grows, more and more people will ask for your help. How do you figure out how to say no and how to do it the right way?
How to push people aside, huh, Jeff? I pay attention to clarity. I said be clear. I do the same thing, meaning that, so sometimes I'll get a note from somebody that says, I want a better job. What should I do? I really don't respond. I mean, I'll say something polite, but I don't respond to that in any significant way, because you're making my life very difficult. You could send a note to anybody. You could send, it's just ridiculous. On the other hand, the people who think about my time, who think about, who present a specific question. For example, I've offered to you email me. The more that you tell me, I don't want a book, but if you say, here's the thing that's really holding me up, here's what I've tried, and I'm just stuck on this one point. And I'm asking you this because I saw, for example, that you wrote about this 2 weeks ago, or I see that you're a freelance writer, so to speak. So, I know that you're always looking for clients, and the more that you can say, this is why I think that you, Bruce, are better suited to answer this than Jeff or somebody else. Those are the people I help. And even more so, for example, through LinkedIn, through Forbes, through my clients, there are people who I can tell you, they have helped me, even if I don't know them, that 10, 15, 20, 30 times, they've either sent an idea, they've shared something, they made an intelligent comment. In other words, they've been proactively helpful long before they ask for anything. Well, those people I will, if I can't immediately help them, I'll send them a note and say, I'll help you tomorrow, I'll help you next week, because again, they're practicing what I just suggested you should do, which is their first instinct isn't help me. Their first instinct is I'm going to help you. And for those people, I will do anything.
Sure, that's interesting. And I guess some people are kind of asking, they want to know how you got started. Like, where did you even begin?
So my wife says I haven't grown at all as a person, because so we met in business school. I was writing for, well, among other things, I was features editor of the Wharton Journal, where I went to school. And then I went off and I had a career. I was a speaker and I was a consultant and I ran businesses and I raised venture capital. But all along the way, I liked writing. And then 10 years ago, I ghost wrote a book for somebody on a lark. And over the past 10 years, I have figured out, I really like that. I still really like that. The things I did for fun 30 years ago, it would be great to have that as a career. And I've turned it into a career by, I showed you my 4 circles before and the bliss in the middle. And to me, it's just saying, if I didn't get paid to do something. So for example, I write, if nobody were reading, I still would write something. And as it dawned on me that, wow, I should get paid to do that, I've shifted my career to that.
Cool. Let's see. We've got a few more. Keep them coming, guys, if you are thinking of anything as we go along. What are some practical ways that someone can showcase their work within their department or organization if they're hesitant to show off or take credit in a public way?
Well, the first thing you do is you respond to demand, meaning, and I don't mean necessarily that somebody's asking you, Bill, can you solve this? But if you see, I went to the Wesleyan University commencement address a year and a half ago. I wish I could remember the woman's name. She was a president of the university, wasn't long ago, and she said, I got here by taking the call, by answering the phone. What she meant was there have been 3 times in 3 different organizations where there was a problem that it was almost an intractable problem, and she saw that nobody was stepping up and tackling it, and she stepped up and she tackled it. And she said, that's how I succeeded, and in a really significant way. And I think that in little ways and large ways, that's the way to do it. If you look for things that it's a problem, no one's stepping up. It might not be exactly what you want to do, but remember my generous and expert, trustworthy and clear, that expert one saying, I'm going to step up in this situation. And, I know in my own career that I've looked for opportunities, large and small, to say, what's the biggest problem in this environment right now, and can I do something to help? Which again gets back to that helpful mindset. What's the problem? Can I solve it?
Sure. All right. Let's see. What else do we have? Okay, here's a tough one. As part of my role, I need to prioritize work with limited resources. Therefore, a big part of what I do is breaking bad news. So how do you maintain a good and positive relationship with these people?
Well, maybe we should turn this back to Jeff.
Yeah.
I think that, I said trustworthy earlier. Part of it is saying to somebody exactly what the situation is. So for example, saying to people, I love what you do, but you're not one of the top 3 priorities, meaning the funding you want, it's not one of the 3. And I'll tell you why it's not one of the 3, because, here's what the other 3 are, and here's why they're more important. What I think people do too often is they essentially lie and deceive, trying to make somebody feel better, but then you don't give that person the ability to understand exactly what's happening. And maybe, so for example, there are times when the best thing you can say to somebody is, you should switch departments, because you're never going to be the priority here. And people think that's cruel. The fact is that might be the biggest favor you ever did that person. So I believe you become a person who is, I'm always going to say it straight to you. It might not be what you want to hear, but it's the truth. And that I'm trying to help you, even if, you're going to lose a battle today, I'm still trying to help you.
Sure. All right. And I think this is our last question from Lynn Carroll. This is a good one. The challenge for her is that she is really confident and an expert in a lot of different things, and she doesn't know if she can focus too narrowly on one or the other. So how do you pick what you promote yourself about, and which skill takes more precedent over the other?
Right. So, one of the things that confuses the heck out of people is if you say too many things. So for me, for example, I love to do this. I love to talk to people. When I switched, I used to have 5 things on my profile, author, consultant, and I took everything but ghostwriter off. And when I first did that, I was worried I would never get a webinar or a speech or anything else. And I got more when I took speaker off, because I correctly identified the reason that people would reach out to me. So one of the smartest things that anybody said to me in the last 5 years was, this is a publicity guy, and he said, Bruce, what's the trigger for somebody to call Bruce Kasanoff? And I had no answer. I could tell you, well, I do these 5 things, but I didn't know the trigger. And I figured out the trigger for me is ghostwriting. If you need a article written for Forbes and you're not comfortable doing that, and you call me, I can solve your problem in 2 days. And for me, that's not the only thing that I do, but it is the trigger that works best. So, what I would encourage you to do is to say, that kind of ask that question of yourself. What's the trigger for somebody to ask my help? What's the trigger for somebody to think of me? You can do this on a company or department level. And once you answer that, that is the one thing most likely to get someone to reach out and be proactive, then everything else follows. And if you don't have that, if you say, well, I'm an artist, but I'm also a consultant, but I'd like to speak, it won't work.
Well, thank you so much, Bruce, for hanging out with us today and for all the great advice. And it's been really great getting to know you.
Oh, thank you, Paige. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm absolutely sincere. If you didn't get to ask a question or you want to ask in more detail, please email me. And to Jeff's point, I actually will respond. I will not push you away.
And absolutely. So once again, my name is Paige Rollins from Longwood University. Feel free to connect with both of us on LinkedIn. I'm going to share some links in the chat bar right now. So if you missed part of Bruce's presentation or just want to watch it again, we'll have that post on our university's website. But also, all right, so if you guys love this content, you can help us keep it free in the future by consider making a small gift. It'll also help us grow our program and continue to host these one-of-a-kind career engagement events for everybody else. So you can visit this site, give.longwood.edu/digital events. Also, for all of the alumni tuning in today, feel free to reconnect with your alma mater in a brand new way. It's our 1 hour a month program. So you can take a picture, connect some students and alumni to the place where you work, or just take us on vacation with you. It's an easy way to show your spirit. So that link is also in the chat bar. But also LinkedIn Influencers Week has just begun. So feel free to register for JT O'Donnell's talk tomorrow, the fastest way to find a job you love. And that link is also in the chat bar. There we go. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to either Bruce or I. And other than that, it was great talking to you guys.
Bye, Paige. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.